we begin with a very important question tonight. I've noticed there's one in the back of the church. I've got one on my wrist. I've got something that serves a similar function right here. The question is, are these things that keep time, are they our friends or are they our enemies? What do you think? Both. Well put, well put. Here's what I've noticed. I've noticed if we didn't have some kind of timekeeping devices, we wouldn't get places on time. Some of you, even if you wanted to come tonight, you might show up when the lecture's over if you didn't have any way to keep track of time, right? But I have noticed something else. There comes a point in everyone's life, and it seems to be not all that far along in their life, where they start to wish that they could turn back the clock. Now, if not on the minutes and hours, but on the days and the weeks and the years. Can any of you relate to this? Yeah, we get it. You know, they say that for gymnasts, their age of peak performance, I don't know if they still say this, but they used to say something like 14 or 15. And when they're, 25, they were wishing they could turn back the clock. Well, tonight we got to talk about something that does have the potential to, physiologically turn back the clock. Something that can help you live longer and better. That's our focus tonight. And it is the science of hemorrheology. Now some of you say, hemorrheology, if I knew that's what the talk was about, I wouldn't have even come, because I've just read so much about hemorrheology. How many of you are so tired of hearing so much about hemorrheology that you wouldn't have even come? No, you're like most audiences. Most people, they've never heard of hemorrheology. Yeah, I can see some of you giving me some verbal or nonverbal feedback that is true of you as well. Let me give you, if you were to go to a medical dictionary, here's the kind of definition you would find for hemorrheology: the science of the physical properties of blood flow in the circulatory system. Or if that didn't sound scholarly enough, how about this one? The science of the relations of pressures, flow, volume, and resistances in blood vessels. Now some of you are saying, well, what does all that mean? Hemorrheology, if you actually look at the word, it comes from a root that you're familiar with. How many of you know what hemo or heme refers to? Blood, exactly. So it's going to have something to do with blood. And then how about rheology? Well, that has to do with the science dealing with the flow properties of complex substances. Do we have any civil engineers in our midst? No civil engineers, huh? I'm told that civil engineers have to study rheology because they have to learn how to deal with wastewater elimination from cities. And wastewater, you might guess, is a complex fluid. You need to understand rheology to design sewage systems. We're talking about hemorrheology. It is the science of blood fluidity. It's the science of the red blood cell, if you want to put it that way. Some years ago, I was invited to give a series of lectures throughout the country of Italy. I was speaking in a number of locations there. And on that trip, there was a part of the time where I knew better than to rent a car. And other parts of the trip where I actually would rent one of those small Italian vehicles. Well, I was driving one of those vehicles in one of those old Italian villages, and as I drove further and further down the road, I noticed something. My powers of depth perception told me that either my car was going to spread apart the buildings or the car was going to be damaged. Which do you think would have happened? Yes, I came to the same conclusion. Why? What was the problem? The problem is the width of the street was narrower than the width of the car. Are you following along with me? Okay. Why am I telling you that story? Because the red blood cell is like the vehicle in the roads of your body, the arteries, the veins. Do any of you know what we call the smallest arterial vessels, the smallest vessels that carry blood away from the body, from the heart, away from the heart? You know what we call them? I heard someone say capillaries. That's what they're called, capillaries, okay? Now, here's the question for you. I told you about the problem that I had with that vehicle in Italy. Problem was, vehicle too wide to go through the road. Your blood vessels, capillaries, tiniest arterial blood vessels, how much clearance does the red blood cell have when it goes through those tiniest capillaries? Do any of you know? How much clearance? 5%, 10%, 20%? How many of you remember a secret I told you about myself last night relating to my questions? What kind of questions do I like to ask? Trick questions. The correct answer is there not only is no clearance, but the red blood cell is over twice as wide as the width of the smallest capillaries. You say, well, how then can the red blood cell get through those tiniest capillaries? Do any of you know? It can actually roll over on itself and squeeze through. The red blood cell has a very unique shape. Do any of you know what we call the shape of the red blood? Kinds of wonderful things, like bringing oxygen to your tissues, getting rid of eliminating carbon dioxide. It is an amazing thing when it's working well. Okay, so you say, interesting enough, but why is it important? Why is hemorrheology important? It's important, well, let me give you the words of someone who wrote over 100 years ago. This was not a medical scientist, but this was someone who was an influential health writer over 100 years ago. That individual said it this way: perfect health requires a perfect circulation. True? It is amazingly true. Perfect health requires or depends on perfect circulation. Before we go too far, I put this slide up here because we're talking about what tonight? Hemorrheology. And there's a real likely possibility that, as bright as all of you are, that one of you at least is going to go home tonight and someone's going to say, "Where were you?" And you say, "Oh, I went to this lecture at the church and it was so interesting and I learned so many practical things." And they say, "Well, what was the lecture about?" And you're going to say, "Well, it was about hemorrhage," and you won't be able to remember it, right? Okay? So I'm trying to help you out. You don't have to remember hemorrheology. You can just call it the Methuselah factor. Okay? Do any of you know who Methuselah was? That is exactly right. He is the man who lived longest on planet Earth, according to the Bible. Any of you know how long he lived? Yes, the Bible says he lived 969 years. Now, how many of you know what blood results we have from Methuselah, like blood work, X-rays, MRIs? What kind of measurements do we have of Methuselah? Do any of you know? We have nothing, right? Nothing. But I can guarantee you this. For someone to live a long time, they had to have good hemorrheology. So can you see why I call it the Methuselah factor? That's what we're talking about tonight. Now, some of you last night picked up a copy of my book, The Methuselah Factor. And that book starts by looking, the first 10 chapters, 10 or 12 chapters, we focus on all of the, well, a number of the things that improving your blood fluidity will do for you. Here's the list. It's in Figure 1. You say, "Dr. Derose, I can't read that." Well, then what would my answer be? Yeah, pick up a copy of the book. No, I wouldn't do that to you. I'm going to go through it with you real quickly. I've enlarged it for you here. So if your blood fluidity is better, you will lower your risk of a stroke. If your blood fluidity is better, you decrease your risk of coronary artery disease. That means having a heart attack or other heart events. You lower your risk of blindness from a number of causes. You decrease your risk of cancer. And if you have cancer, you decrease your risk of dying from the cancer. It's getting really interesting, isn't it? You're more likely to maintain your mental faculties the better your blood fluidity is. Your blood pressure will be better. You'll have less problems with diabetes. You'll be less likely to gain weight if you're overweight already. It will help you lose weight. You'll be less likely to get arthritis. And if you say, I'm not concerned about any of those things, well, it'll help you perform better throughout life, no matter how old you are. Let's take a look at a few of these things just to show you how important this is. I'm not going to look at all of them. Like I said, we got 10 or 12 chapters in the book that go through it. We have some free videos that I'll tell you about online if you want to learn more and you don't want to buy the book. But let's just talk about a few of these things. We're going to talk about stroke first, okay? The better your Methuselah factor, the better your blood fluidity, the less likely you are to have a stroke. Some 20 years ago, they did this study. So this is not just something that happened yesterday. It's surprising to me that so few health educators and physicians talk about hemorrheology. It's been out for years. This whole medical society is devoted to it. Whole medical journals devoted to it. In this particular study, they found nearly 300 people who had evidence of problems with blood supply to their brain. They had either had strokes or TIAs. How many of you have heard of a transient ischemic attack? Have any of you heard of that? I can see a number of you have heard of that. A TIA is just like a stroke, only it completely resolves. It goes away all by itself, usually within a matter of minutes, but by definition within 24 hours. So, transient ischemic attack shows problems with blood supply to the brain. Just like a stroke, they took 297 people that had brain blood supply problems, and they compared them to 73 healthy people. And here's what they found. They found a variety of ways that you can look at blood fluidity. Whatever you measured that looked at blood fluidity, the worse it was, the more strokes and TIAs they had. So let's look at this list. The first one on the list is hematocrit. Do any of you know what hematocrit is? I can see a lot of you have heard of it, and you think, well, what is that definition of it? Hematocrit is the percentage of your blood that is made up of red blood cells. So if you go to the doctor and they check your blood and they say your hematocrit is 52, what does that mean? Yeah, 52% of your blood is made up of red blood cells. Well, what's the other 48%? Yeah, plasma and white blood cells and proteins, and you get the picture, okay? So here's the trick question for you. What should you choose, a high hematocrit or a low hematocrit? I said it's a trick question. I gave you two choices. It's neither. That's right. It's neither. If your hematocrit is too low, do you know what we call that? Anemia. That's right. And some of you have experience with anemia. How much energy do you have when your hemoglobin and hematocrit are low? Oh, no. You need hemoglobin to carry oxygen, okay? That's the protein in the red blood cells that carries oxygen. Okay. How about if your hematocrit is too high? True story. Actually, a whole bunch of true stories. Some years ago, in the United States and in the world, there was a professional sport where the athletes became preoccupied with artificially elevating their hematocrits. Do any of you know what sport it was? That's right, cycling, okay? Yeah, it's cycling. Some of you may have even heard stories of people that won, important races and things, and they were getting drugs to artificially raise their hematocrit. Before we had those powerful drugs, there were people that the way they would cheat and raise their hematocrit is they would get what we call an autologous transfusion. The way that works, let's just illustrate it with a cyclist. Cyclist is going to be in a big race in 2 months. 2 months before the race, he goes to the doctor's office who's complicit with him in this scandal. He doesn't go to the front door and check in at the desk. He knocks on the back door of the doctor's office. They let him in, and they take out a pint of his blood. They mix it with the appropriate preservatives, and they put it in the refrigerator. A month later, that cyclist is back in the doctor's office, going through the back door. What happens then? Not quite yet. Remember, it was 2 months at first before the big race. Now it's a month later, but it's still a month before the big race. Now they take another unit of blood because he's had a chance to build up his blood cells. They take another unit. And now, the night before the race, what happens? Give him 2 units back. Now, does this help his performance? Well, it does. He can carry more oxygen now. Okay? He can get more oxygen to his muscles. But there's a price that is being paid. And that price is your hemorrheology is worsening. The blood is thicker. Okay? And there are case reports of as many as 20, maybe even more, elite cyclists who died either during or immediately after races because of blood doping. You say, what happened? Well, presumably they got a bit dehydrated during the race. Their blood was already thicker, and then it clotted in a blood vessel going to their heart or to their brain. They had a heart attack or a stroke. Highly fit people. But what was the problem? Poor hemorrheology. Now, I've got something with me here, I think. Let me just make sure I brought this along. Okay, here it is.